Hey heroes, and welcome to another fantastic episode of History of the Marvel Universe. The subject of this week's video is voted on by Patreon supporters. If you would like to help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing to cast your vote over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelate, or you can give me your suggestions in the comments below. This tale is all about a Russian scientist and cosmonaut named Dr. Ivan Kragoff. Born in Leningrad, little is known of Kragoff's early life or activities before the Marvel Age of Heroes. Due to the nature of the sliding timeline, exactly when he was born is somewhat nebulous, but he's old enough to have worked under the Soviet Union and remained staunchly loyal to his communist ideals even after its collapse. For example, he is noted to have worked on Project Zephyr, a Soviet program in which 3 men were mentally conditioned and trained by the Winter Soldier. Kragoff's contributions stemmed from techniques he developed to similarly train and mentally program simian primates. His PhD, however, was in the field of radiology, and Kragoff considered himself to be the world's foremost expert on cosmic rays. As such, when Reed Richards and his comrades became the Fantastic Four after an attempted space flight, Kragoff deduced that this was due to a solar flare amidst increased sunspot activity, causing an unusually high level of cosmic radiation that penetrated their ship's shielding when they attempted to pass through the Van Allen belt. Wishing to endow himself with superhuman abilities as well, he designed and built his own unshielded ship out of transparent ceramic plastic and waited for similar conditions. He convinced the Russian government to fund his efforts, and his crew consisted of 3 trained primates. He had a baboon named Igor, who was an expert marksman proficient in the use of firearms, Piotr, an orangutan who could use tools to repair Kragoff's machinery, and the one who would actually pilot the ship, a gorilla named Miklo. Now, Kragoff was preparing for his journey into space when he learned that Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four were planning an expedition to the mysterious blue area of the moon. Wishing to prove his superiority, Ivan Kragoff plotted to reach the moon first in the name of communism. Now, I will note here that the initial telling of this story took place in 1963, several years before the Apollo 11 moon landing, so originally Kragoff's motivation was to claim the moon itself for the Soviet Union. Of course, with the sliding timeline constantly moving the start of the Marvel Age forward, in modern continuity these events would have happened within the last 2 decades, notably after the dissolution of the USSR, but Kragoff's communist loyalties have remained established canon. Furthermore, while this is obviously no longer canonically the first manned mission to the moon in the Marvel Universe, it is still the first publicly recorded expedition to the blue area, so the original story still works in that context. But in either case, Kragoff's plan to fly through the cosmic radiation proved successful, as both he and his simian crew were endowed with superhuman powers. The baboon, Igor, gained the ability to shapeshift into various animals and objects. The orangutan, Piotr, gained the power to project waves of magnetic force, granting him the ability to attract or repel both objects and individuals. And the gorilla Miklo gained superhuman strength even greater than that of a normal gorilla, putting him on par with Ben Grimm, the Thing. Kragoff, meanwhile, gained the power to selectively render his body and anything he touched intangible, allowing him to pass through solid objects, and dubbed himself the Red Ghost. His control over this was precise enough that he could grasp solid objects while simultaneously rendering the rest of his body completely intangible, including his clothes. Both he and the FF landed on the blue area of the moon, where they discovered the ruins of an ancient alien city and a breathable atmosphere surrounding it. By the by, if you're unfamiliar with the origin of the Blue City, then be sure to check out my video on the Kree-Skrull War. But there on the moon, the Red Ghost and his Super-Apes ambushed and attacked the Thing. But their combat was interrupted by the Watcher, Uatu, a powerful but pacifistic alien who had established a home within the moon's blue area. We've talked about him before as well, but on the off chance you're unfamiliar, his ancient and powerful race swore to observe the lives and evolution of other races without ever interfering in their affairs, although Uatu himself was always one to bend that rule if he believed it was for the greater good. In this instance, the Watcher didn't want their battle to escalate into a war that would encroach into his domain and transport both the Red Ghost and the Fantastic Four to a secluded section of the Blue City to settle their dispute there. In the ensuing conflict, Kragoff took Susan Storm captive, hoping to lure the others into a trap. This was still in the early days of the Fantastic Four, so Susan hadn't yet developed the ability to generate invisible force fields that would eventually make her a much more formidable opponent. The Red Ghost also kept his Super-Apes locked up and hungry, feeding them only when they obeyed his commands. Left alone with them while Kragoff hunted her teammates, Susan Storm successfully freed the apes, allowing them access to food, after which Miklo broke down the door so that she and the apes could escape. Susan then successfully warned her teammates of the Red Ghost's trap, preventing them from being struck by a disintegrator beam. Determined to find another weapon to defeat them, Kragoff used his powers to enter the Watcher's home, but was quickly noticed by Uatu, who threatened various forms of banishment before simply expelling the Red Ghost with minimal effort. Meanwhile, Mr. Fantastic lived up to his name by quickly designing and building a paralysis ray that was able to stop Kragoff even while intangible. Impressed, the Watcher declared the Fantastic Four the victors in the conflict and allowed them to retain the memory of his existence. Meanwhile, the Super-Apes turned on the Red Ghost because of the way he'd mistreated them and freed him from the effects of the paralysis ray, only to chase him across the surface of the moon while the FF returned to Earth. However, Kragoff eventually regained control over his simian servants and plotted his revenge. By sending Ben Grimm a fake letter from his old rivals in the Yancey Street Gang, Kragoff successfully lured the FF into another ambush and attacked with the Super-Apes. This time it was Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, who was taken captive and held in a fireproof sack. Forcing the others to surrender, the Red Ghost marched the Fantastic Four onto a new vessel, one powered by Piotr's magnetic abilities. He brought them to the moon once again, but rather than landing on the oxygenated blue area, the Red Ghost simply ejected their cell onto the airless surface and left them to die. However, by this point, Susan had begun to master her force field abilities and quickly encased herself and her teammates in an invisible bubble, along with enough oxygen to survive the journey to the inhabitable blue area. Entering the Watcher's home, Reed Richards made use of a power ray that forced Kragoff's ship down to the surface. In the end, it was Susan Storm who defeated the Red Ghost by knocking him into a matter transmitter device when he tried to hold Reed at gunpoint. Ironically, or maybe fittingly, the machine actually sent his body back to Russia, where the government disavowed his actions and imprisoned him in Siberia. The Super-Apes also returned to Earth in the ship he'd left behind, largely thanks to the automatic pilot, but were similarly impounded by the Russian authorities. The Red Ghost escaped his confinement by phasing into the ground and came upon the network of caves and tunnels known as Subterranea, as well as another enemy of the Fantastic Four, the Mole Man. The two villains formed an alliance and threatened the surface world with an atomic gyroscope capable of speeding up the Earth's rotation, but their schemes were ultimately thwarted by the Avengers. After that experience, the Red Ghost returned to Russia and freed his Super-Apes from confinement as well. When Dr. Doom subsequently manipulated a number of villains into attacking the wedding of Reed Richards and Susan Storm, the Red Ghost and his Super-Apes were among those who descended on the ceremony. Of course, there were also a number of heroes in attendance, and so this time Kragoff and his apes were banished to another dimension by Doctor Strange, only to be deposited back in Russia when Richards used a subatronic time displacer from the Watcher's home to send all the attacking villains back to where they were before the attack started, with no memory of what had happened. The Super-Apes were again captured by the authorities, and the Red Ghost mistakenly believed that they'd be executed. Meanwhile, Kragoff's superpowers began to fade, which he believed to be a delayed side effect of the Watcher's matter transmitter. Seeking to regain what he'd lost, he trained two new gorillas, Alpha and Beta, and established a number of hidden labs across the globe. He also forged an alliance with a fellow former Soviet, Miloš Masaryk, aka the Unicorn, a Czechoslovakian who remained loyal to Russia and served as an intelligence agent after the fall of communism. The codename Unicorn was in reference to a laser beam he could fire from the forehead of his helmet, a device designed by the original Crimson Dynamo Anton Vanko. Now, maybe we'll get more into that story another day, but at this point in time, Masaryk had been brainwashed into being used as a test subject by Russian scientists, who greatly increased his strength using a device called the Hyper-Activator. This machine was designed to permanently endow a human with levels of strength that could normally only be attained with the extreme rush of adrenaline that came during rare moments of crisis and stress. However, this came with a side effect of a significantly reduced lifespan. What the scientists didn't expect, however, was for the process to undo the mental conditioning that rendered Masaryk complacent. Seeking a cure for the cellular disruption that threatened his life, he destroyed the lab and fled. He clashed with Iron Man, who damaged the belt that powered his costumes, weapons, and flight systems. And after narrowly escaping that encounter, he was found by the Red Ghost, who drew the unicorn to one of his laboratories and provided him with treatments to temporarily counteract the negative effects of the Hyper-Activator ray. In return, Kragoff had Masaryk steal a cosmic ray intensifier from Tony Stark so that he could reignite his own superhuman abilities, as well as empower his new gorillas Alpha and Beta. As a result, Alpha was endowed with superhuman strength, while Beta gained increased intellect and the ability to control minds. Meanwhile, Kragoff's powers mutated, allowing him to transform into a red, mist-like form. In the ensuing clash with Iron Man, the Ghost betrayed his ally, destroying the lab with both Unicorn and Iron Man inside. After that, the Red Ghost used his new abilities and Super-Apes to seize control of a S.H.I.E.L.D. facility where he plotted to build an Ultra Cosmic Ray Intensifier that would allow him to empower an entire army of superhuman gorillas. But because of Kragoff's betrayal, the Unicorn forged an uneasy alliance with Iron Man to oppose him. Furthermore, with his increased intelligence, Beta also turned against the Red Ghost, deciding that animals like himself had no need for conquest, and so Beta commanded Alpha to destroy Kragoff's machine, foiling his plans. The two gorillas were later returned to their natural habitat along with other captured apes and have remained there in peace ever since. But throwing one more betrayal into the mix, the Unicorn also turned on Iron Man and abducted the Red Ghost with the intention of forcing him to find a more permanent solution for his cellular disruption. However, the science required to create such a cure was outside Kragoff's area of expertise, and Masaryk eventually abandoned him, seeking help from the Mandarin instead. A little bit of a side note, the Unicorn told the Mandarin that the Red Guardian failed to save him, which is clearly just a mistake in the text confusing the two characters, but I like to think that Masaryk actually misspoke and got Kragoff's codename wrong. But anyway, due to the repeated unpredictability of apes, the Red Ghost shifted focus to marine life and developed methods of using small doses of cosmic radiation to place sea animals under his mental command. With this, he sought an appropriate ally, leading him to join forces with the water-breathing barbarian Atuma. They abducted a renowned marine biologist, Dr. Joseph Jennings, and plotted to force him to help create an army of enslaved porpoises with which to conquer the undersea kingdom of Atlantis. They were opposed by a team of defenders, but the villains succeeded in capturing and enslaving Namor, Hawkeye, and Valkyrie, forcing the three heroes to lead the charge. In the end, however, Doctor Strange and the Silver Surfer combined their powers to erect a barrier around the Earth that blocked the influx of natural cosmic rays. Cut off from his source of power, the Red Ghost lost his abilities, and those under his mental control were liberated, allowing Hawkeye and Valkyrie to easily defeat him, while Namor handled Atuma. Of course, the barrier was necessarily temporary, and Kragoff inevitably escaped, his fluctuating abilities causing him to regain his tangibility powers. He subsequently learned that his original Super-Apes were still alive and freed them from captivity, at some point establishing a mental link with them that ensured their loyalty. Kragoff also briefly allied with the Negative Zone warlords Annihilus and Blastar, aiding them in an attack on the Kree hero Captain Mar-Vell, but this ended in defeat as well. After escaping from the Negative Zone in the wake of that debacle, the Red Ghost sought to steal a gravity localizer from Reed Richards and employed a woman named Nina Pushnikov, who worked under Richards as an intern to locate it. However, his attempts to obtain the device were interrupted when Spider-Man and the Human Torch installed it into their ill-conceived project, the Spider-Mobile, allowing the vehicle to drive on walls. Kragoff attempted to distract the two heroes long enough for his Super-Apes to abscond with the car, but Spider-Man was able to draw the primates' attention away with a store display of delicious fruit pies. After that defeat, Kragoff attempted to increase his powers with yet another dose of cosmic radiation, but this experiment backfired, leaving him stuck in an intangible, semi-transparent state. Believing he could use a new cosmetronic cannon designed by Tony Stark to cure himself, he sent his apes to abduct Stark and held him captive in an underwater hideout at the bottom of Long Island Sound. Insisting that he wasn't able to construct a new cannon with the materials that Kragoff had on hand, Tony convinced the Red Ghost to return him to his lab at Stark International so he could modify the original device to do the job required. After getting what he wanted and being rendered solid once again, the Red Ghost commanded his Super-Apes to eliminate Stark, but Tony already prepared an escape plan and slipped away to don his Iron Man armor. That battle ultimately ended when the Red Ghost attempted to use his intangibility powers, only to find that the Cosmetronic Cannon's cure was a one-time deal, and he quickly lost control of his abilities, seemingly fading away. It was only through force of will that he prevented his molecules from dissipating completely as he floated over the Earth as an intangible mist. He tried and failed to absorb enough cosmic radiation to restore himself, but then he took notice of a spaceship piloted by Reed Richards, who had returned to the Van Allen belt for a similar reason. With his own powers having faded, Richards artificially recreated the circumstances of the original accident, renewing his abilities. But having snuck on board the vessel, the Red Ghost was restored as well. He not only regained full control over his original powers, but even displayed the ability to render other objects intangible without even needing to touch them. He also gained the power to dematerialize and rematerialize at will, and could even bring his Super-Apes with him, which he demonstrated after reuniting with them once again. At some point around this time, Kragoff helped form the Intelligencia, a loose-knit alliance of criminal masterminds who aided each other in various schemes. Villains involved in this included the likes of Dr. Doom, Egghead, the Mad Thinker, the Leader, and the Wingless Wizard. Although after the apparent death of Egghead, MODOK was brought in to replace him, and if you've seen my Red Hulk video, then you'll already know what schemes he and the Leader later cooked up as members of this organization. But in the meantime, Kragoff continued to look for ways to increase his power, at one point trying to steal a rare mathematical treatise from the library at Empire State University, resulting in another confrontation with Spider-Man. After that scheme failed, Kragoff decided to strike back at the country that had disowned and attempted to imprison him. From a secret lab on the Arctic island of Novaya Zemlya, he plotted to target multiple Russian cities with an earthquake machine, but was thwarted by the Soviet super soldiers, a team of Russian agents including Dark Star, the Crimson Dynamo, Vanguard, and Ursa Major. The team succeeded in destroying the machine, but before they captured the Red Ghost himself, the Soviet super soldiers were coincidentally abducted by the Grand Master to be used as pawns in his contest of champions, while the Red Ghost escaped yet again. Shaken by his multiple defeats, he fled to New York and began constructing a new device to increase his power, the Cosmicizer, but ran out of funds before it was complete. Not wanting to face his enemies until he was ready, he lured an elderly master thief known as the Black Fox to his Manhattan penthouse, where he ambushed and captured him with his Super-Apes. The Red Ghost tried to force the Black Fox to rob a jewelry store and get enough money for him to complete his machine, sending the Super-Apes to accompany him. Afraid for his life and wanting only to retire in luxury, the wily old thief complied, but awaited an opportunity to escape. The robbery caught the attention of Spider-Man, and while the Super-Apes escaped when the baboon Igor shapeshifted into a large bird and carried the other two away, the Black Fox was left behind, and told Spider-Man exactly where to find the Red Ghost. And so in the end, Spider-Man ensured that the Cosmicizer was destroyed and foiled another of Kragoff's attempts to empower himself further. However, the Red Ghost and his Super-Apes deftly evaded capture once again. Kragoff later returned to the moon and attempted to steal technology from the Watcher, but an unrelated conflict between Quasar and the Living Laser alerted Uatu to the intruders in his home. This resulted in a battle between Quasar and the Red Ghost, and while Kragoff was subdued and turned over to the Russian authorities, he soon escaped again. Later, after intercepting alien communication signals, he learned of the smart ships used by the equine alien race, the Chimelians. He located one such vessel on Earth and tried to steal the artificial brain within, but was ultimately defeated by the smart ship's owners, a group of superhuman children called the Power Pack. Not long after, there was an incident in which the Super-Apes were abducted and outfitted with cybernetic implants, making them loyal to Guillaume Courage, a lieutenant commander in the Belgian Ministry of Defense. With the mental link to his Super-Apes suddenly severed, Kragoff was left confused and disheveled, and was ultimately arrested and taken captive by Commander Courage. However, the techno-organics expert that Courage had employed in enslaving the apes, Dr. Jennifer Niles, was an old ally and former lover of the X-Man Hank McCoy, aka the Beast, which led to his involvement in these events. The whole situation ended up getting unnecessarily complicated, but in the end the Beast cracked the computer program controlling the Super-Apes and set them free. Commander Courage used techno-organic implants to transform himself into a type of superhuman called a Wereborg, but was ultimately slain by the Red Ghost, who recovered from his catatonic state after the Beast freed his apes. However, these events, in conjunction with his already fluctuating power set, would prove to have lingering after effects. In one instance, Kragoff's skin turned red to match his name, and he gained the ability to mentally control his Super-Apes' every move. During this time, he joined the Wizards, a Frightful Four, alongside Ulysses Claw and a terribly mutated Sharon Ventura, hoping to seize control of the group. However, this version of the team split up after being defeated by the Fantastic Four. Later, his unstable mutation shifted again, causing the Super-Apes to grow more intelligent and share each other's abilities, while Kragoff himself became more dull-witted and childlike. During this time, the Super-Apes became outraged by the animal experimentation being conducted at Empire State University and plotted to release a deadly nerve gas from there as a revenge, but were ultimately defeated by Reed Richards. After regaining his intellect, the Red Ghost briefly employed another ape named Dimitri, who was imprisoned alongside him and the others in a facility called the Cage. While there, Kragoff and his apes acted as muscle for a fellow Russian inmate known only as the General. The Red Ghost's mind and body eventually stabilized, and he ultimately escaped from that prison with his original Super-Apes, all three of which retained heightened intelligence and the ability to speak. Kragoff has had plenty of schemes since then, like when he attempted to take over the African nation of Niganda so he could develop a new form of Marxist-Leninist socialism based on the ape world. But no matter how many times he fails, how many times he is thwarted, or how often his apes turn against him, the Red Ghost always returns, and will probably continue to be a recurring threat to the various heroes of the Marvel Universe. But that is all I have for you this week, and so thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me. Let me give a special shout out to all of my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members who help make the channel possible. By signing up for any ongoing amount on any of these platforms, you'll get your name in these special thanks here, but Patreon is the one that helps determine what topics get covered on the channel via monthly polls. And of course, I do need options for people to actually vote on, so be sure to let me know what you want me to talk about in the comments below. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!